Living with the Spirit. Today we have our 50 minutes off, and we will talk about different kinds of trauma and turning any kind of trauma into self-empowerment. So take it away, Simba.
Take it away. Well, so we're going to talk a little bit more this week about what trauma really is. But trauma really is something, an event that impacts you, right? Something that makes you feel unsafe, something that really affects your nervous system, your mind, and your body on a physical level. But the trauma isn't what happened to you when this traumatic event happened in the past, right? So the event itself is not what we call trauma. What the trauma is, what happened inside of you due to what happened to you. So if I was in a big trauma, car accident, physical abuse, sexual abuse, um, mental abuse, uh, in an environment that was very aggressive, or there's addiction, or those are the things that people kind of think about. Or if you've been a soldier and you've been to war-torn countries, or civilian in war-torn countries. So a lot of the times when I talk with people and they think about trauma, they think about what we call big T trauma, right? The big traumas that are quite obvious. And that's actually how the whole history of trauma started. People say, oh, it's shell shock, it only happens to soldiers. But then with research and behavior science, they started to realize, wait a minute, stress, accumulated amounts of stress can lead to trauma as well, but it might not be a big trauma. It might be a small trauma, small traumatic events in your everyday life that causes this stress in you. And really what happens is that your body will respond to it. And many times when there is a traumatic event, the body cannot unleash that energy, right? It's feeling threatened and it wants to mobilize energy to do something, to fight this threat or to move away from it, but it can't do it, usually due to the context of the situation, right? I can't fight off a missile coming in, blowing down a building, but I still feel, I'm threatened, right? But there's no adversary, there's nothing to do. And maybe I couldn't flee away. Maybe I was in a bunker, for instance. So just as an example, like we mentioned now, all of these small stressors, they start to affect us, right? But the energy isn't really going anywhere. So then we start to like embrace other behaviors, right? It could be like we talked in the past about the procrastination, or that I start to people please, or that I do a lot of other uh, aspects, right? That I kind of go into a lot of responses when I'm feeling this stress in this trauma. But the real work when it comes to trauma is to realize that the trauma, it expands your awareness, expands your belief system. It kind of pushes you out of the zone where you're at. And once you start to integrate that, once you start to teach your body to feel safe again, to start to let that energy out and adapt new patterns and behaviors, then it becomes a self-empowerment tool, right? And it's a little bit tricky sometimes. We'll talk more on Friday about trauma in general, but it's a little bit trickier because there is a nervous system part and there's a behavior component to it, right? So the nervous system is the stress we feel in our body, the PTS, and the behavioral part is how we make up and believe the world functions due to what happened in the family or in the area that I grew up. And that might need another type of empowerment or intervention to kind of work through. But that is essentially, how you take something that has stressed you and that your body felt that it was going to, die or feel very threatened, and you integrate it, you let out that energy, and now you have expanded the way you look at the world, the way you look at yourself, and we have more capacity to function and to realize it in others, and also to help others because we can see it in others and we've done the work ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is that, of course, we have these big T traumas that everyone knows, and then we have all the small, like the small T traumas, that is the constant stress of the body because living is stressful. I mean, that's like in Ayurveda, they talk about that you have the digestive fire, and that's not definitely not only connected to the food that you eat. They talk about being able to digest life in general, like the emotions that you go through, the events that you go through, the relationships that you go through, you know, the micro and the macro events of the world, and you know, and it's our ability to digest these things. And small t traumas, they build up because we are not skilled or knowledged or equipped, or you know, because most people don't really have the skill to know what to do, how this works in the body. And then we accumulate over time the small things that, because we I work with a lot of people who say like nothing really bad happened to me, so I don't really understand why I feel this way. And that is a very common thing, that it's the small things, and that the life that we live and the society that we live in today is very demanding, and it can be challenging to live in. So we accumulate these small traumas, uh, but the work is the same, and we can use the impact that life had on us, and as Simba said, turn it into something powerful, because we have the yin and yang balance in the world, where negativity and positivity is like always a cycle, and it's always going to be there. And we can use the the things that happen to us to find new depths, and we can use it as a trampoline to reach something new. So many people that we work with here who come with their situations, they realize most of the time, even if they went through something horrible, that everything comes with something positive. You can turn things into something positive. And healing trauma and freeing up the body and freeing up the space with all that energy that is costing the body so much, then all of that will turn into self-empowerment, because you will be empowered by the newfound energies that you didn't have access to before you started the inner work. So for some people, the inner work can start with, oh, I really want to be free from this addiction, or I want to be pain free. It's very specific. But when they realize, like when they work through that, they realize, oh, if I continue now beyond my initial goal, there's even more levels that I can reach. And that's why we talk about this abundant lifestyle. Then that's like on the other side. It's trauma work. If you continue beyond the trauma, then you will reach the levels of abundance.
Yeah, and exactly like you said, you know, the human autonomic nervous system is not designed to have long periods of stress. So just look at anything you do today. Do you really feel that you finished something? Oh, I'm gonna do the same thing next day. I'm gonna worry about money or health or my kids' health or my parents or grandparents or this situation there, this virus there, this attack there, this there is always stressors, right? There is always stressors, and we're not designed to have all of these stressors at us and challenging us like this all the time. Of course, it will be different, right? Depending on how you lived your life and how you grew up. If it becomes traumatic or if it's just a stressor, but when you start to accumulate small stressor, that starts to be can start to become traumatic in nature because you never get done, right? The nervous system is supposed to feel this threat, fight, flee, shake, do something, release it, back to steady state. But we don't really get into that steady state, that grounded zone. So we're up and kicking up in the activated zones all the time.
Yeah.
And that becomes traumatic in nature. Like if you look at an animal, if he gets hunt, like if there's a predator that hunts an animal and he managed to escape, it will shake like a lot, let all the tension out, and then it will start to play with its peers to be hunted in different ways to practice not to wind up in the same situation. And then poof, so the trauma has turned into maybe not self-empowerment for an animal, but it has turned into a survival strategy of evolution, right?
Mm.
And that's how we can kind of look at it for ourselves. But it's a little bit hard sometimes if you don't have that context. If I just believe this is what life is and I continue, then I might actually be going around with a lot of trauma, and I just go like, yeah, but this big event didn't happen to me, so I can't really say I had a traumatic event. But it might have been a lot of small events that was just chipping away and adding stress into my life. Birth trauma is a thing, right? The time it takes for you to be born, several hours trying to come out of a body full of adrenaline from your mother, from you, that is a very stressful situation as well. So when you look at it, we could have had a lot of traumas that could be a base or an origin for why we have stress resilience or lack of resilience. So when we look at this with trauma, we're really looking at the education to understand what it is, how it affects us, right? How it has affected the shape of our patterns, moods, thoughts, and to really clear out that energy so we can have more of that energy. Because when we have traumatic events, it costs vast amount of energy to suppress them to continue to live everyday life. And once you start to clear that out, you will just have a tidal way of new energy coming in that you can really turn into self-empowerment, because now you just have extra juice into whatever you want to do in your everyday life, right? We're not having to push things down all the time when we go around, and in our everyday life, we can really direct and create things, be creative, and put all of this energy into resourceful endeavors instead of trying to, like if you ask someone like, oh, what's your dream? Oh, I don't want that. Oh, I wish I didn't have that. That's what I hear a lot. People know exactly what they don't want, but how does it really look like what you do want, right? How much time do you spend thinking about that, formulating, working towards that, Oh, I work so I can pay rent, so I don't get kicked out of my house, and so I can pay my loans. Yeah, but what is it that you do want to do? What's the passion? Not the fear. We're trying to
Yeah.
work. We don't want to work away from fear. What's the passion? And the way that we look at things like this, fear or motivation, can also come from trauma. So it can be a baseline for a lot of different behaviors and thoughts and patterns that we have, and we're not even aware of it many times. So that's why we want to bring some awareness that you start work through a trauma can really turn it into self-empowerment, and then you just have vast amounts of energy to use, and your mind starts to free up, right? You're not limited in the same way. You can just create and move forward and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and if you are ready to turn your trauma into self-empowerment, we highly recommend you to join our Module 1 TRE, Tension and Trauma Release Exercises. Now in May, it's a weekend immersion where you the main purpose of the workshop is for you to get acquainted with the philosophy and the tool that's called TRE, Tension and Trauma Release Exercises, and that you can start to incorporate it in your own practice in a safe way. And you will also get an introduction to the polyvagal curve and the autonomic nervous system and how that works, because that's the key to healing any kind of trauma and turning any kind of challenge into self-empowerment. And also you will start to explore grounding and self-regulation, and that means that you can by yourself take the control back and learn how to regulate your own nervous system, and through that start to really really heal yourself. So this is one of the more powerful, it's a massive power into a little bit, like it's really into a 2-day immersion. So it's a very very high value weekend, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. So you're more than welcome to do that. If you have any question, feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to answer that. But it's a 2-day immersion. You really get to ground yourself for several hours and work with your nervous system in a practical and theoretical way. So we'll really give you a boost in your own personal practice, whatever it is, to move forward and feel more empowered, right? I can actually do something about this, and I can understand more why I might be acting in a certain way, or why I might be winding up in certain situations. So it really is a good start for any kind of personal developmental progress or process that you might be in.
Very well. You can always read more at livingwiththespirit.com and send us a message on any social media or on WhatsApp or Telegram to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Lots of love. Have a good day and a good week, and I'll see you soon.
See you soon.